What's up? What's up? What's up, guys? Let me know in the chat if you can hear and see me. I have not perfected this whole live streaming thing yet. Just waiting for confirmation and then we'll get into this. So I do not want to start this without. All right, good. What's up, Daryl? I see my wife's in here. Tina, what's up? What's up, guys? Where are you tuning in from? And let me know if you're excited as I am. So I have not watched this debate. Have not watched it. It popped up on my news feed. Oh, my ring. It popped up on my news feed this morning while I was working, and I couldn't watch it. I sent it to my boy Rob over at the Love Agenda, and he's watched about half of it. He said it's really good. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch it. I might as well react to it live with you guys. So if you're new here, oh, we got Detroit in the building. Nice. If you're new here, I've covered Billy Carson multiple times, mostly because he says a lot of wild stuff about Christianity. He also talks about the law of attraction, which I wrote a whole book debunking right there, so you can get that on Amazon. But I am really excited for this, and I just want to caveat this. It's a long debate, and I'm not going to play it in like fast forward mode because I want to hear everything. But before we get into it, the reason why I kind of go so hard at Billy Carson is he has shipwrecked a lot of people's faith. I have a friend who got really into him, and his wife is like, oh, my husband believes all of this stuff, and do you have any videos on him? So I sent her some videos, and it's difficult to break somebody out of that. Then I know another woman who their husband got into Billy Carson stuff, and then they ended up getting separated because it led him down to renouncing Christianity, so on and so forth. I'm not sure if he was actually a believer to begin with, but this causes a lot of damage. Billy Carson, he says things with such a confidence that if you don't know any better, you're going to believe him. And that's why, man, am I so excited that this went down with Wes. So excited. And to answer your question, Jen, the baby is doing amazing, healthy. So praise God for that. So, all right, guys, we're going to get into this. We'll watch this together. Please like, share this video, subscribe. If you enjoy this content a lot, consider being a Patreon supporter. Really helps me. I'm currently working on a video debunking Aaron Abke or Agbe. I keep forgetting his last name. His gospel conspiracy. And it's taken me, man, I've been working on it for weeks. It's like a 6-hour video, and I've been working on it for months while I'm moving, juggling the baby. So anything helps, guys. Appreciate it. But whether or not you become a Patreon or support, totally fine. I'm just glad that you're here watching this. I just care about this debate getting out there. All right? With that being said, are you guys ready? Drum. I wish I was better at this live stream and stuff. I would have had a button that like did a drum roll or something like that. But all right, I'm gonna just want to apologize in advance if I like fumble this live stream a little bit, just because I'm not too good at it. So here we go, getting into it. I think this is the boom. All right, the moment of truth. Here we go. And just let me know in the chat also if you can hear the audio of the video, if you can hear it clearly, because if not, I'll try to raise it.
Businessman. He's been on Elevating Beyond last time, sharing your whole story behind the story. And what you hugely specialize in as well, you just came back from Egypt, is like the emerald tablets. You've been studying those since what, you were like 6 or something? I think?
No, not the emerald tablets.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the emerald tablets I've been studying for the last probably 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah, but since I was 6, I was studying aerospace technology which then led me into understanding more about advanced technologies and then finding the link between advanced technology and ancient civilizations.
Dude says he's been studying aerospace technology since he was 6. I was too. It was Star Wars.
And going on literally a 25-year, what's that, 27-year now, goodness, trek around the world. Been around the world now over 18 times. Last year, spent 9 months in hotels.
I remember.
As you know, you were my witness, leaving this big old mansion behind and not going home at all. And
you notice you got to plug the big old mansion. Just want to give a big shout out to Mark Menard. I have had conversation with him about this, and he really wanted to release this, and he felt conflicted because he's friends with Billy. Billy doesn't want it to be released, and he just has felt like it needs to be released. And then when I saw it pop up on the feed this morning, I was so grateful.
Grind.
Traveling nonstop to these ancient sites to get the information hands-on.
Okay. And that was weird. I just heard a little chime. Wes, you there?
He's frozen.
Oh.
Yeah, I saw in a video that Mark did that Wes's computer kept freezing for whatever reason.
It'd be too easy if it worked perfect, right?
Yeah, I know. What is he calling in on? What is that app?
This is through
Stream Deck?
I'd have to ask Carl. It's through it actually works great usually, unless there's something going on with the Wi-Fi.
I think it's pretty cool. I'm just trying to figure out. I think it's on his end of his connection.
So we're gonna watch all this. Even all these fumbles, we're gonna watch it all.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, what is the name of this thing you're using, this portal?
It's I want to actually press. It's I think it's all through Ecamm.
Ecamm, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so they have their own link. Then
nice.
You can set this up for different guests. You can make.
Ecamm is demonic.
When Carl was here through like Eric Thomas, we're just doing the show, waiting for him to call back.
Yeah.
Yeah, he helped get some of these pre things going, but you can get way more fancy if you got someone that.
Yeah. No,
I'm just like, how do I do it?
Yeah.
To where
I think it's a pretty cool platform.
Let me exit, try to jump back in. Okay, cool. So we'll figure this out in some editing and stuff, or maybe we'll just leave this in. But as Wesley's getting ready to jump on, Wesley Huff is so with Billy, like you can watch the previous show, and I've had the honor of being on his podcast. So like-minded in so many ways, and I've been talking about this for a while. I'm like, it'd be interesting to have you on and discuss. I don't love overly getting obsessed with the word religion, so I would say more of where some of the beliefs differ. If I was to be connected to a religion, it would be closest to Christianity and the Bible, although
So Mark has told me a little bit about his coming to faith. He's definitely a new believer. So keep that in mind as we listen to this. I don't know how much he's going to be speaking, but just keep it in mind that he's a new believer. Give him some grace if he maybe says some things that are not theologically accurate. Praise God that God has Mark, a believer, in Billy's life, even as a new believer. But this is why it's so important to dig into this stuff, because Billy Carson can snag a new believer out of their faith real quick. At least, so to speak. I believe in eternal security. So when somebody puts their faith, I believe you're secure. But that's a whole different debate. Anyway, he can get you to not even believe in it at all if you're just starting to believe in Christianity.
Old Testament, I have still, it's the New Testament and Jesus's teachings. I have my whole life story where that changed me and transformed me belief wise as a person. And okay, it says he's in the green room.
Okay.
And let's see if we got Wes on.
Hello.
Wes, we got you back on. So I'll introduce Wes too, but yeah, what I was just saying real quick, Billy, too, is I also a shared belief I think too with you with God is I also believe I know God is within me too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and I don't believe that it's like you have to do 20 circles in the sand and
Right.
like do a ritual to that was through like my connection with Jesus, where I know throughout my life that's been my, when things are tough, it's
Mhm.
like the strength of God is literally within me.
Right.
As so like where we do agree on, where like a lot of the heresies and stuff through over religious practices would be like, no, you have to come through the head of this church to
Mhm.
be blah blah blah, you know.
Right. Right.
And personally, and we're about to get Wes on, so we can have two really smart people in this talk about it. But I'm just breaking it down to my level
Mhm.
of my understanding. That's been what really drew me in, is kind of when Jesus came and flipped all that on its head and was like, no, we're not. What was it, like the Pharisees?
Mhm.
Like, what were the hype? He's like, we're not having to go through all the rules. He's like, they're actually worse than this thief right here.
Mhm.
And really looked at what was in people's hearts, you know?
Right.
And
Billy's just. I feel like Billy's being a good friend at this point, because Billy be coming at Christianity's neck. He just did a video. I think I haven't watched it, but I saw the title, and forgive me for just assuming what it's about. But the title is Christians are worshiping Satan or something like that. So I'm supposed to hop on with Rob from Love Agenda to talk about that. But it's like you just see him like, yeah. But in Billy's mind, he's probably like, man. Anyway.
I think that's a beautiful thing. I know it has been for my life.
Yeah.
But so Wes, now that we got you on, Wesley Huff, historian, linguist, biblical scholar, PhD, and athlete wannabe. I like how you threw that in the bio right there. And Wesley, my man, I think it would be great to. I know you guys were both recently in Egypt. There's tons that I'm interested in. That how all these things show up in Egypt is baffling to me. But just going right to it, I had here, Billy, you talk about how Jesus was never crucified, which is interesting because my wife, who's a Muslim, they believe that as well.
Mhm.
Their beliefs, from what I understand from her, are they don't think that Jesus, as they believe is a prophet, God would have him killed. But I don't think they have any historical evidence, as far as I know, as to what or how or why they believe that. I'm curious for you guys both, and if you want to, I guess, go first, Billy, as to how you came about like the findings where it seems that Jesus was not crucified, or that's not accurate.
Sure. And in my videos, and if you listen to the podcast, the statement is according to the Sinai Bible. Okay, according to the Sinai Bible, Jesus wasn't crucified in that Bible. That Bible predates the King James version of the Bible, and the text there actually is about 12 to 14,000 differences between the Sinai Bible and the King James version of the Bible, which came much later. And then also one of the things that were interesting is that they discovered the book of Jesus' wife, which is at the Harvard Seminary, which, according to some scholars, is a little controversial, but they claim that this is an accurate record that Jesus may have even been married, which then, adds more, if that's true, it adds more to the hypothesis that maybe he wasn't crucified. I just personally believe that Jesus was an amazing human being. I don't think that he was the Son of God in the sense that he's God, but that we're all gods. As he said, ye are gods, and that we're to do greater things in him. And I just personally believe that the return of the Christ is the return of the Christ consciousness. When we can all achieve a certain level of knowledge, wisdom, passion, understanding, empathy, love that he came to this planet with, and we get that in our mind and our conscience, and we can act on that, that those incredible emotions and that understanding, that the whole world is going to transform instantaneously. And I think at the second coming is the coming of the Christ consciousness to the planet, not a human being flying back to Earth to save people. That's just my personal understanding of how I've perceived it over many, many years of going through this information and going through all this text.
So he's not coming back to save people. He's coming back to judge the world.
And Wes, I'm gonna let you respond to that. And again, I mean, this is everyone listening to the show. You know, I'm always like, challenge everything. Learn to critically think and continue to come to your conclusions. Even with Jesus, I'm not personally even waiting on that he has to come back to. I already know I'm, like I said, that strength of God and consciousness is already, I can tap into that right now. So you don't have to wait for him to come back. For those that believe he does, to actually have that like next level of what that's supposed to mean.
Mhm.
Yeah, so you can see when Mark is speaking that he's mixing Christianity and some New Age and New Thought stuff right here. But he's a new believer. I did the same thing when I first became a believer.
But Wes, go ahead on for what Billy was talking about. I think with a book in the Harvard Museum, and I heard something about Jesus's wife, which that's, yeah.
Yeah, well, first let me say I think it's really cool to not just be in the room proverbially with you, Billy, but be able to interact with you. Because I wish I could be there in person. Unfortunately, Toronto, Canada, is a long way away from Florida. It's a little bit of a jaunt. But I really appreciate the fact that you seem to have investigated to a certain degree some of these facts. Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
When you say the Sinai Bible, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the biblical text that was written. It made it into you can actually look it up on Amazon. It's a Bible called, I have a version at home. It's called the Sinai Bible, right, from Mount Sinai. I'm assuming that's the mountain that they're referencing there. But they put together their own version of the biblical text prior to the King James Version being put out.
Sure. So when you refer to the
Sure.
Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus, like the codex that comes? Okay. That's why I was trying to get some clarification, because so you can actually go and see Codex Sinaiticus is at the British Library, so you can go and see it. It's on display, and the British Library has actually digitized the entire manuscript. So I work with manuscripts in my linguistic work. I'm an expert on early Christian scribal culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here. And the only reason I asked for clarification is because I want to make sure that what I'm addressing is actually what you mean.
Gotcha.
And not addressing something else. Because the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just it's a 4th century Greek manuscript.
Mhm.
It comes from approximately between 325 and 350 AD. And its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translations from. So my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there. I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say, Matthew 27, where it has Jesus being crucified.
Yeah.
And that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or, the John 19, or any of the other ones. So I think my confusion is that it doesn't read any differently. So actually, are you able to pull up a website with the
Yeah,
viewers or listeners or
I'm
whatever be
looking
able to
for
see
it
this?
right now to make sure I have
What
the version that I'm looking at.
while he's pulling that up too, like I keep saying to all the people that aren't scientists traveling the world and linguists, I don't even know how to pronounce it the right way, like
Yeah,
me.
linguists.
What is
Yeah.
cyanide? I keep thinking of cyanide, like the cyanide Bible. So is
Right.
that like a version? So from my own knowledge that I know, like
Just hold on there, Mark. But what I think it's actually really good that Mark is there, because you know how he's admitting that he doesn't even know what this word means. He was thinking of cyanide, which is like toxin, right? So it's good that he's there because it shows what these quote unquote big words do to new believers. So Billy using these big words and these technical terms and these titles of manuscripts that a new believer just never even heard of before. When he says all these things, it makes him sound so credible. So if you're somebody like Mark, who's a new believer, listening to Billy Carson say all these things and use these big words, you're just sitting there like, man, he must know what he's talking about. How could I even question him? Thank God. Look at the way God works. God has connected Mark with Wesley Huff. Nobody better.
when I really studied all this, what I thought was interesting about the Bible was how many like different eyewitness. I studied C.S. Lewis back in the day, how many different eyewitnesses and stuff there were. And they went on purpose to mention so many other names.
I just want you guys to pay attention to the left side of the screen as Billy is scrambling to find this.
That they were able to like cross-reference throughout history and throughout those times, from my understanding. And those were different things that I always thought were kind of interesting that I felt was a good concept of proof. And then I want Billy to answer, and also I'm just curious, like the Sinai Bible, where was that
I
piece
found
discovered?
the text where I was referencing. Actually, I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
So has he been misquoting it or misspeaking this whole entire time in every single podcast that he's done? Or is it just right now? I'm gonna have to go back and look at some of his previous podcasts to see if if he quote unquote misspoke then as well, or did he just misspeak right now? So love it.
Okay, yeah. Well, so that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with. There are two manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery, and so that's why I think it's important to get to these sources. So, at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have two copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish. We see right off the bat that the Gospel of Barnabas, not to be confused with either the Epistle of Barnabas or the Acts of Barnabas, which are two apocryphal documents from the 2nd century, but the Gospel of Barnabas in particular, we know it's a forgery because it does things like in chapter 92, it says that Jesus spent 40 days on Mount Sinai and then he came to the Jordan River and he
Just the fact that Wesley, off the top of his head, knows that the Gospel of Barnabas only has two copies and one of them is in Spanish and one of them is Italian. Just that alone, that he has this in the file cabinets of his mind to just pull out mid-conversation like this shows you just a different caliber of knowledge that Wesley has on this stuff.
walked to Jerusalem, but Mount Sinai is more than a week's journey away from Jerusalem, and neither Mount Sinai nor Jerusalem are close to the Jordan River. So never mind there not being a route from the Jordan River to like around Mount Sinai or going to Jerusalem. But there are internal problems with the Gospel of Barnabas, which indicate that it shows no actual indication of evidence of coming from or even having knowledge of first century Jewish understanding. It actually says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah, which indicates that whoever the author is, he didn't know that those were the same words. And I think a bigger problem is that the Gospel of Barnabas actually paraphrases Dante's Inferno, which was written in 1314. So there's a lot of internal evidences that disqualify the Gospel of Barnabas, never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century.
I don't know if Billy even understands what internal evidence means.
And none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish. But the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient. And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante, or it also refers to a rule of the time of Jubilee, which was changed in the Middle Ages from what it was in the biblical year of Jubilee. And it goes with the Middle Ages concept, not the ancient concept. So I think what I'm getting at is, so I'm a historian.
Yep.
And I deal with sources. So when I'm looking at sources, I want to make sure that I have a methodology by which I approach any type of source. So if there is something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure that I'm analyzing it and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event. So if we're talking about, say, Codex Sinaiticus, that's in the 4th century. Now that is, I would agree with you, Billy, our oldest copy of the Bible in the sense of cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible.
Right.
The problem is that we have individual copies of all 4 Gospels going back hundreds of years before Codex Sinaiticus. So I have a facsimile behind me of P66. This is a late 2nd century copy of the Gospel of John. I work with this particular manuscript. I can just show the screen right here. This is an almost complete copy of the Gospel of John. And it
Is that the
has the
papyro by
crucifixion.
any chance? Or is
Yeah,
that a
so
word that I just
papyrus
made
is
up?
just the what it's made out of.
It's the
So
material it's on.
I got that from Chat GPT, by the way.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so
guys. I'm just
I
trying
can
to sound
actually-
smart for a second.
That's probably how Billy realized he misspoke. He went over there on ChatGPT.
I have that papyrus at home.
Oh, that's
Yeah. Well, a
Yeah,
copy.
so I'll show you this. So the documents you actually see on my bookshelf behind me are facsimile papyri that I've made. So when I was in Egypt last summer, I went and I got made for me some papyrus sheets. And so I take these papyrus sheets, which are made from the papyrus plant. And then when I go and I look at actual manuscripts, so I was at the University of Philadelphia last summer, and I went and I saw a document called P1, which is a 3rd century fragment of the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And so what I did is I sat down with that original and I produced a facsimile. So I copied the text. First of all, I cut it out with an X-Acto knife in not the original 3rd century one on my papyrus. I cut out with an X-Acto knife this guy, and then I copied the text transcriptionally on the front and the back. So papyrus is just simply, it's what it's made out of.
Yeah.
And so there's categorizing systems, and the standard one is called the Gregory Alland categorizing system. And so sometimes you'll see when manuscripts are mentioned, they'll have a GA and then a number behind it. If it's made of papyrus, you simply abbreviate the word papyrus to P, and then you have the numbering system. So P66, what I showed you earlier, that's this on the categorizing system. It's the 66th manuscript that was put into the system. It's from the Gospel of John. I also have, P46 and P47 on my shelf.
I just need to pause and praise Wesley for how into this he really is. Like, he made a facsimile by buying papyrus and using an X-Acto knife to create his own piece of, I forget which piece of papyrus it was, but this is something, there's levels to being into something. Wesley is into this just for the sake of being into it. Billy is into it, this is just me speculating, for the sake of popularity. Those are two, Billy's not sitting at home with an X-Acto knife recreating P66. He's just not doing that, right? So Oh man, I'm so excited for the rest of this.
Which includes all four Gospels and Acts from the 2nd and 3rd centuries. So the only hesitation I have with what you said, Billy, is that we have single copies of the Gospels that can be dated to the 2nd century that all do have the crucifixion. And so if we're relying on something like the Gospel of Barnabas, which is not just like, it's not that there's debate about it, it's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of
If you
Barnabas as
say it's a
anything
known
other than.
forgery, if you say it's a known forgery, yes, but I'm going to go with that. Let's talk about the Old Testament a little bit and leading up into the New
Well,
Testament.
hold on, because do you mind if I address the Gospel of Jesus' wife?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure, go ahead. You see how quickly Billy wants to move on?
But what was her name
Yeah,
again? I'm like trying to write notes like I know what I'm doing, but I'm just
So
curious.
the Gospel of Jesus' wife doesn't actually mention. So oftentimes
Oh,
what
okay.
happens is that the text of the Gospel of Jesus' wife is kind of paralleled with the Gospel of Philip, which mentions that that Jesus would kiss Mary Magdalene on the mouth. And so those are kind of used in parallel to kind of for this argument that Jesus was married. So the Gospel of Jesus' wife is in the Harvard Library. However, the reason we know it's also not legitimate is because even though the manuscript, the papyrus that it's on, was carbon dated to the 4th century, the text was actually copied from a PDF version of the Gospel of Thomas known as Grandin's Interlinear. And there was a mistake in the Coptic text of Grandin's Interlinear that was copied into the Gospel of Jesus' wife. So we know that this is not a legitimate document, even though the papyrus is ancient, and this happens a lot with forgeries. I have a couple of friends who have actually worked on projects that have revealed forgeries within Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts and within other ancient Christian papyri. But the reason why we know the Gospel of Jesus' wife and that Karen King, who kind of vouched for it and she lost a lot of credibility, unfortunately, for her, and she's admitted that it's a fake as well, was because we can tie it directly to not copying from an ancient text, but actually copying from an online version of the Gospel of Thomas in a PDF form. And the mistake on that PDF form was copied into the text that was borrowed in the phraseology of Jesus' wife. So I just point that out is, once again, with our sourcing, I think we need to make sure that we're going towards not just early sources, but actually credible sources. And unfortunately, neither the Gospel of Barnabas nor the Gospel of Jesus' wife are credible sources in terms of actually, and agreed upon by not just the vast majority of scholarship, but I don't know anybody in the field of papyrology, paleography, historiography, who actually refers to these documents as being legitimate.
Smoked. Good on you, Wesley, for not allowing him to move on and pinning him down and finishing out that thought, because that was very important. Because, man, I think that Wesley is severely underrated and underutilized. I'm really enjoying the more content of his that I see, the better, the more that I like him. And DRV is asking how I got the footage. He posted it this morning, so downloaded it.
That's fair enough. That's I can respect that. So let's go into the Old Testament a little bit. Predominantly, from my research, I discovered that a lot of information from the Enuma Elish and the 7 Tablets of Creation is a lot of in Genesis, a lot of the creation story that comes into Genesis. Not all of it, but because obviously Genesis is a much smaller version of a much bigger story. But it's literally almost word for word from the Enuma Elish and the 7 Tablets of Creation. The Epic of Atrahasis as well is also there in the Old Testament. Several other tablets as well, Code of Hammurabi and a few others have made it into that text. Sumerian cylinder scrolls that talk about the creation story. again, the creation story in the Epic of Atrahasis. And so we tend to see this this copying of ancient tablets, text, and scriptures, even some papyruses, into the biblical text, meaning that my point here is that I think a lot of people are saying that this information was written in real time. A lot of people believe that. If you ask the average person, they really believe that. But a lot of this information is just copied from older tablets and texts from an earlier date. That's what I found, that it's made it into the canonized Bible, but they never reference that they got it from any other ancient texts and tablets that have to do with a totally different civilization with totally different religious beliefs.
And it's a totally different story. There are similarities, but it's a totally different story.
Have you read the Enuma?
Yeah, I've done lectures
Do you
on
mind?
it.
Sure. Do you mind summarizing the content of the creation account in the Enuma for us?
Sure. The Enuma Elish is a very ancient text discovered in the Library of Ashurbanipal, and the summary of it is that it really gives us an account, which is crazy, an astronomical account of the creation of our solar system. It talks about planets and moons gaining specific orbits around the sun. It talks about a huge planet named Tiamat, 46 times larger than Earth. Earth didn't exist at the time that this, according to the author of this text, which is pretty interesting. And then there talks about a nemesis of sorts. In the original version, it's called Nibiru, but in a more recent version, still thousands of years old, the name was changed to Marduk. Marduk is in the Jewish American Library, in the biblical text, in the Torah, and so forth. Very popular figure in ancient times in the religious books and text. Marduk wanted to be the destroyer, so Marduk is the one that during its next orbit towards Tiamat, crashed into Tiamat and destroyed Tiamat. A huge chunk of it swung away, recoalesced, taking the water, land, and organic material, which basically recoalesced as our planet here, Earth. And the rest of it broke up into pieces. Some of it turned into the asteroid belt. Other parts of it were thrown towards the sun, and some were thrown towards the inner Oort cloud, towards the outer edge of the solar system. This planet, or this moonlet that orbited supposedly a brown dwarf, based on the description of it, gained a very strange orbit around our sun. And we have the scientific evidence now also to match with NASA's data, where we see that Saturn and I believe Neptune switch places. Uranus is flipped on its side, and that's more evidence that something came through our solar system in ancient times and gravitationally really tugged at planets here and switched up their orbits and even pulled the axis of a planet on its own side, where the equator is now running north and south. So a little bit of modern astrophysics kind of backs up what this ancient text is saying. But the Enuma Elish also then begins to talk about the fact that these beings, it kind of cuts into the fact that these beings, are on Earth and at some point begin to engage mankind. In other words, they didn't create people from scratch, but they engaged the existing hominid and began to utilize us as workers for their workforce. In the Atrahasis epic, you see a much similar story, slightly later date period, but still thousands of years old, the Epic of Atrahasis. And we see a very similar story. And we see where the sons of God literally came down to Earth. They came from Mars, according to this text, if you read the translation of the planet Mars and to English. And then they went to battle. They were going to go to battle in South Africa against Enki and Lil and Anu. And they come to terms without going to battle. They argued that they needed women, human women, believe it or not. And they also wanted a workforce. They didn't want to continue to do the labor. They were cleaning out the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, digging canals, building cities on Earth, and according to the text on Mars, not according to me. And a decision was made by Enki and Anu and Enlil to allow this experiment to happen, where they would take the existing hominid here. They would slay one of the gods, meaning that they would, in my opinion, that doesn't mean that they're going to kill it, but somehow some type of genetic modification or manipulation, in my personal opinion, that's my personal hypothesis. But in the end, it ends up being that human beings are now doing a lot of this labor and worshiping these people as gods, as they, my personal opinion, masqueraded as gods. A lot of stories there, parallel stories that you see in the Bible, even the Tower of Babel incident, and many other crazy stories that are in the Bible. You can find a lot of those true stories in the ancient text, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, where you can find the true story of Noah. They found the Noah tablet to give him instructions on how to build the ark. It wasn't a big boat; it was a round disc that he built with sections cut up on the inside like a pie.
So I haven't looked at this in a while, but I'm pretty sure it was a cube, not a disc.
That was discovered about 4 or 5 years ago. I believe it's at the British Museum now. So there's a lot of text that's just been covered and copied over into the biblical text. And I think that, in my personal opinion, a lot of people are just became a cargo cult, worshiping people that were masquerading as gods. I do believe in God, by the way. Let me make this clear. I believe in God. I believe there's a creator of the universe. I believe that the mathematics, the quantum physics, all proves that. The fact that we're here, I believe this universe is imbued with a divine energy and a divine spark that lives inside of all of us. I just don't believe that the God of the Bible is truly the creator of the universe. I don't think that God needs money. I don't think that God needs
Sure. Do you mind if I just jump in here for a second? Because I think we've kind of gone on from the original question. I appreciate that. I do have a few issues with your summary, although I think I have read the Akkadian version. My Akkadian's not great, but I sat down with a Syriologist friend and we walked through it a couple of years ago. So I think that there are components of what you said that I would say are in there. I'm not sure it's the best summary. Nonetheless, okay, going with what you said that there were like verbatim parallels with the biblical creation story. Even just going off of what you said, which I think there are components of that I would agree with, the Battle of the Gods, the concept of Enki and the younger gods, and they fight Tiamat, and then Marduk, who swears he'll defeat Tiamat, and Kwenku, who kills Tiamat by shooting her with an arrow, and there's this big battle, and then the gods that die end up being the earth and the sky and even us, because we are the end result of that battle. I'm just curious, when you say that there are not just parallels, but there's actual copying, looking at Genesis chapter 1 and 2, where the creation story is summarized in the Bible, what are the actual kind of parallels there that you're looking to? Because as someone who's read both, I not only do I not find parallels, I actually, and this is the majority of ancient Near Eastern scholarship with me, think that Genesis chapter 1 is actually an apologetic against documents like the Enuma Elish. So,
oh man,
what are the parallels there?
Separated the waters from the waters, for example. That's in the Enuma Elish.
Separated the waters from the waters. The whole thing's stolen. Separated the waters from the waters.
And that's also in the biblical text.
Okay, that's
and that was it. I was expecting more. Oh my gosh.
That I would agree is a parallel. The only reason I highlight that is that if you're making this the argument, because if you brought it up, and I mean this with all due respect, there are superficial parallels. I would agree. The separation of the water, the concept of the earth being formless and void. That's also in the Enuma Elish. However, I think all the other details, it's the details that make the difference. And if we're looking at not the superficial crossovers, but the actual themes and concepts of what it's saying, you don't have a creation within 7 days.
The Bible's not going to take the Enuma Elish and put it into the biblical text. There are certain words that they utilize that let me know that they copied it from that text. Like, for example,
what words?
Separating the water from the waters, the void, the earth being void. That information is literally just copied over. So it tells you that somebody saw that and said, let me add it to this book right here. Or let me add it to this scripture or this papyrus, because it wasn't a book yet at that time.
So was this text discovered that...
Oh, no, Mark. No. Don't jump in now, Mark, please.
That makes it parallel to Genesis. Was this like supposedly discovered prior to? I'm just curious.
It wasn't discovered prior to the Bible, but it dates back long before the Bible was ever written.
Oh,
Yeah. So
okay.
Together.
let me just say this. So the reason why I say it's actually an apologetic against that is because the purpose of the Enuma Elish, which the Babylonians read every Babylonian New Year, was to point out the fact that the deities, and there's countless deities in the Babylonian pantheon, they actually come from the created order. So they're not outside of time and space. They actually come from the created order. And when they die in this battle, right, when Tiamat is defeated, the defeated gods become the earth and the sky and the plants and even you and me. And in that sense, the theme is that you don't actually have any purpose or end result, and you're not created in the image of God. In fact, in the ancient Babylonian system, only the kings were created in the image of God. And what we see that is counter to that is that even, sure, there's superficial, divided the waters, but we find that in almost every society and culture. That's not a parallel as much as it's just a generality. I would say what we see within the biblical account is that God purposefully creates. There's only one God. He purposefully creates, and then he creates, and it's good. And it continues to say it's good 7 times. And then at the end of chapter 1, just for the thick people in the original audience, it says, and then it was very good. And then he creates humanity, not kings, but simply the humans that he creates in God's image. And they have purpose and meaning, and that instills them with this creation order. And that's not what we find in the Enuma Elish. In fact, we find the opposite in the Enuma Elish, is that the created order is not good. It's a mistake. And that you are not created in the image of God. And there's a reminder that regular people are not created in the image of God. So linguistically, I mean, Hebrew does have Semitic ties with Akkadian. It doesn't with Sumerian. Sumerian is a language isolate, agglutinizing language. But I would say, just with all due respect, the parallels linguistically are not there. There might be superficial kind of concepts that are there, but they're so superficial that we can find them in everything. In the sense of, I'm in my office studio, you're in your office studio. That doesn't mean that that we're the same people or we're even in the same place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't agree with that. I just see if I have all these texts out, there's a lot of different information that you can see. There's a lot of it's been copied word for word into the biblical text.
So what is word for word, Billy? This is what he asked you. What was copied word for word? You say separated the waters from the waters. The waters from the water. That's 6 words. 6 words. Is that it? Only 6 words? So, man.
But what's the word
in the
for word?
in your version of what you believe in, you keep saying that God's a he.
Yep.
Yeah, now he's going to try to switch it. Watch. He's moving. This is a tactic. He's moving from the point that is being made and moving on to another subject. Oh, but you see how God is a he. Billy.
And so where do you get that from?
Well, throughout both the Hebrew Old Testament and the Greek New Testament, you have the masculine singular pronoun used for God.
And why is God a man? Where's the evidence of this?
Well, God isn't a man. See, within historical Christianity, we don't believe that God has a gender. However, the way that he has decided to reveal himself is through the masculine plural, and then ultimately by becoming a human in the person of Jesus Christ. So we don't believe that God has a gender. In fact, the fact that God creates humanity in his image and he creates them male and female, those are 2 aspects of the image of God. And so that's the completeness. So historical Christianity has never argued that God is gendered. Jesus is gendered in the sense that during the incarnation, he becomes a human man, but he's still fully man and fully God. But God is spirit. And right, as the scripture says, we worship him in spirit and in truth.
And God is
but nobody's arguing that. What's that? Sorry?
That always blows my mind.
God
too.
is the same all the time, right? He's always good.
Man, they moved right on. Billy was getting smoked, and they moved right on. He pulled him right into this, why is God a masculine rabbit hole?
Always, God is all the same all the time, right? Is that
Yeah, but we do see that in Scripture, God has revealed Himself through the masculine plural, and there are aspects of
that's
God's character
convenient?
that we see within Scripture that do actually communicate. Jesus says that He longs to gather Israel like a mother hen collects her chicks. So we see aspects of the feminine of God, not meaning that God is feminine, but that the image of God reflects both the masculine and the feminine, and that's why when the two become one flesh, there's a uniting of that reflects the image of God as well
Do you
within
believe
the
that the majority of
covenant of
Christians?
marriage.
Do you actually believe that the majority of Christians really believe that God is not masculine? That God is has both aspects? If you
I
ask
mean,
if
it's
you ask 10
irrelevant what the
people, if you
majority
ask
of
10
Christians
people on the
believe.
road, how many
Yeah.
would tell you, that God's not a man? They've never been taught this.
Well, I was taught it growing up. I was taught it in when I was a child, when I went to seminary, when I went to Bible college. I was taught it in graduate school. I would say I would say a few things to that. I would say, in one sense, it's irrelevant what the majority of Christians believe, because what historical biblical Christianity articulates is what they should believe. There are Christians who run around saying all sorts of things that are not in conformity to biblical, historical, Orthodox Christianity.
You're
And
absolutely.
they shouldn't believe that because it's irrelevant. And so if one Christian believes something that is not in line with biblical Christianity, I mean, that's on them. So God is not gendered, but he does express through inspired scripture the masculine the masculine uh, pronoun.
That's pretty convenient. I mean, for an all-knowing, all-loving God to understand that human beings are going to take that and abuse it.
It's rhetoric, Billy. That's rhetoric. Let's get to the facts. Let's get to the truth of this. This is rhetoric. It has nothing to do with, is Christianity true, and is what you're saying about Christianity false? This is rhetoric. Sorry.
To put their boot on the neck of women for eons. It's pretty interesting. Also, I'm trying to
Yeah,
understand
I
this.
mean, so hold on. Let me speak to
Wait,
that,
can I
because it
say
is
something there
interesting
real
that.
quick, guys? I have to.
Yeah, sure.
If it was only for the Old Testament, I would have a hard time following a lot of stuff.
Yo, I love Mark. I really like this guy.
It, for me, like what you said, putting the boots on women and stuff, it was when Jesus came that when they were literally like, oh, if a woman, you can just accuse a female of having an affair and murder her, and that's like okay. That he was he just reminds me of anyone that basically challenged everything. And people would say that it didn't contradict what's in the Old Testament, but however people were interpreting it, they were believing that they were following the Bible to women can't do this. You stone them if they have an affair or if they're accused of having an affair. And Jesus, as we
That was anybody. Sexual immorality was a no-no.
know, the famous scene when they were about to stone her, he's like, he who hasn't sinned cast the first stone, basically saying no one's perfect. And was the first one that I know of that started like speaking to other tribes and other countries that people weren't supposed to, like they were so racist and prejudiced. And this is where my heart opened up, is like he stood for this love and this God that broke down all these barriers and just flipped what all the scholars and everything was saying on its head. And that's where I found that I believe that he was crucified, because he went so far like against the grain at the time. And I get what you're saying too. Like there's stuff where it's like, oh, that's convenient, where human beings can add in that this is there and that's not. But something else that I always was curious, I'm like, if especially the New Testament, if it was like written by man and stuff and pre-planned, I'm like, I think they would have done a better job of not making a lot of the people so like ignorant. The people that were like literally with Jesus questioning him half the time, like, bro, I don't know if you can do this miracle. And Jesus is like, dude, you just saw me yesterday turn water into wine. And I'm like, if they really, if I was writing a story, I'm like, I want everyone to believe this, I would make the people not like is questionable. It's like they have so many characteristics where the humanity in it is.
Yes, that's why scholars, that's one of the reasons why scholars believe that the Gospels are an accurate account of things that happened, because they left all the embarrassing parts in it.
What like always drew me. And like even one thing in the Old Testament that David and Goliath kills Goliath, a man after God's own heart. I'm like, if you're pre-writing this to be the perfect person after God's own heart, then he becomes king. You're gonna like have the story end perfectly, but then he goes off to see, he's watching this lady bathe nude, has an affair with her, has her husband killed. Mm-hmm. It's like, but then goes on to keep praying to God and coming back to God, like with a humanity. And God's like, this is a man after my own heart. And it's like finding all these human flaws is, to me, showed so much of like the beautiful struggle that, and I'm not going off everything you guys are talking about, which is factual stuff. I'm just talking from my own experience of ways where I drew and continue to draw my own conclusions. And I'm much more about my relationship with God personally, with Jesus and God. It's the same, over worshiping the religion, because so many people can, as we all know, that's wars are created, slaves are taken. There's so many horrible things that have been done in the name of religion.
Praise God for Wesley's patience and Billy's patience. You can see they're like, well, Wesley is ready to go for Billy, and Billy's probably enjoying the fact that Mark is talking because it gives him time to avoid the conflict.
And it's sad, and that's where Jesus comes back into the game to me. I'm talking you guys to me, to where he was like the one that was like gathering all these people of all these, like, what are you doing? Like, we're supposed to be here helping each other. This is about loving each other and coming together. Like, you're killing them because they eat meat on Tuesday and they don't eat bacon on Sunday, and you're literally like murdering each other. It's so messed up. So I get where people look at different organized religion and stuff, and they're like, this is horrible. Like, on behalf of Christians, I'm like, I'm fully apologetic for, what was it, the Crusades. It's like, in the name of Catholicism, there's so many horrible things.
There's also multiple crusades, and this is not to justify them, but when you dig into the history of it, it started as a response to Islamic aggression. And then there was a lot of atrocities that happened. And this is also what happens when church and state are merged, and it causes a whole lot of chaos. But yet, so it's interesting listening to Mark go through all of these. These are popular talking points when it comes to objections about Christianity. And praise God that he's still, even though he has all these questions about it, and these are kind of stumbling blocks for him, praise God that he is still seeking in that direction. But this is why, guys, it's important to learn about these things, so that way you can answer these questions, because these are some of the most popular questions and some of the most popular pushback towards Christianity, these things that Mark is saying.
That human beings have done. And I'm speaking as someone that I would call myself a Christian, and I'm just letting everyone know that I'm open, critical thinker, and how I've continued to find my own beliefs, because I never sat here ignorantly and was like, nope, throughout history, they've all been perfect. It's like, through the Crusades, they went through and committed genocide, rape, some of the most awful stuff, wearing these huge crosses. And I'm like, but God wasn't with them. They said he was, but that's why I also believe in the devil. And I don't believe he's this dude with a pitchfork and a red tail. I think it's more comes, in energy and thoughts, and comes in people, and is like, oh, talks to this guy.
That's it's very Napoleon Hill, outwitting the devil. The devil is real. He's not this guy with horns and a pitchfork, but he's an actual personal being
who's rising in power. You should start
Yeah.
conquering that other country in the name of, and do it in the name of God. And then, that's the way I look at things. So anyway, go ahead. I had to just throw in.
Yeah. I mean, there's a really great resource written by a friend of mine, John Dixon. It's a book called Bullies and Saints, where he goes through a lot of the instances of we're obviously going to find abuses, and every human being is going to find a way to exploit whatever is presented to them. So in one sense, I think we can say, isn't it convenient that God used the masculine plural pronoun, or sorry, the masculine pronoun. I keep saying plural, it's just a mistake. The masculine pronoun. And we can say, oh, sure, that's convenient, maybe, but it is how he has revealed himself to us. And it's not his fault if we abuse that. I mean, we could say, so I grew up in the Middle East. My parents worked in Amman, Jordan. And when I was living in the Middle East, there was a country called the Democratic Republic of Iraq. Now, just because democracy exists and people are going to name things democratic when they obviously aren't, doesn't mean we then judge democracy. I mean, think of the Democratic Republic of North Korea, right? Nobody thinks that that's an actual representation of democracy. So people are always going to abuse terms and ideas and concepts. The difference is, though, I think historically within Judeo-Christianity, you have this ethic that we were talking about before that I think is fundamentally different than what we find in things like the Enuma Elish, the Atrasis, and other things, in that we are created in the image of God. And actually, one of the earliest criticisms of Christianity are by individuals like Celsus, who is a Greco-Roman philosopher in the 2nd century, where he accused Christianity of being foolish, dishonorable, and stupid, and he called it the religion of slaves, women, and children. Why? Not because God used the masculine pronoun for himself and people were abusing that, because the concept that Christians believed in of everybody, no matter what your gender, your race, your social standing, Paul says in Christ there is no slave nor free, there is no Jew nor Gentile, there is no Scythian or barbarian, there's no male nor female. These things united people. And we can see there's a historian named Rodney Stark. And in his book, The Rise of Christianity, he actually says that you can track empirically the agency of women across the ancient world by the movement of Christianity. So that, in other words, whenever an area became populated by Christians, we see a direct correlation with the privileges and treatments of women that expand in time when the surrounding culture largely didn't view women as being fully human. So I think we're always going to have abuses, but if there's one worldview that exists that gives agency to people and says that everybody has worth by nature of being just human, it's the Christian worldview. And that's where I think it's very different. So we can argue about why we think God should or shouldn't have revealed himself in his pronouns, but I think that's actually irrespective of the historical reality that we see within the impact of Christianity, particularly on the West, but around the world, and how it gives agency to the marginalized.
Just piggybacking off of what Wes is saying, if you go to Inspiring Philosophy on YouTube, he has a video, I think it's titled How Christianity Changed the World, and he'll show the data points of what Wesley was just talking about, and it's a really great video. He also he just did a debate against an atheist where they were discussing whether or not Christianity or secularism is better for humanity, and that was a really good conversation as well. So definitely head over to Inspiring Philosophy on YouTube. Don't do that right now, though. Stay here and hit that like button.
Wes, can I ask you one? So when because I'm always interested in this, like you were raised Christian. I always think about this, like my wife who's Muslim, and our beliefs at the core are so similar, but there's some differences. And I wonder, like, if I was born in Sierra Leone, West Africa, where she was,
Mm.
I know in the Bible says Christ revealed, but C.S. Lewis is someone that I really respect because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a think outside the box always, and we should be. No one should just be like sheep and follow what any of us are saying.
Well, we should be like sheep and follow Jesus and just listen to what he tells us.
Like, do your research on your own with everything, of course. But what led you, sorry, going back to C.S. Lewis real quick. He was a famous scholar who was once an atheist, set out on a journey to basically disprove the Bible. As he went to do that, he himself found out that it to be like one of the most historically accurate written books, which really shocked him. He then became a Christian after that. He's done the Narnia movies, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or their books. They weren't movies when he passed away. But he has an amazing... I love people like him because he doesn't just act like... He always was questioning everything. He's like, why is there this going? Why are these little kids dying, God, when they're... But something that he continued to come up with, which reminded me so much of Jesus and the love conquers all things too, is when so many people overly get caught up on religion over the relationship. And he's like, I've actually met some atheists that are closer to God without even knowing it. And
No, they're not.
I've met some Christians that are further away from God without even knowing it.
So I'm just going to interject here. If you are a Christian, you are as close to God as you are going to be in this life, whether you feel like you are or not. If you are truly a Christian, you are as close to God as you will ever be until the next life. If you are not a Christian, you are as far from God as you will ever be until the next life, right? So that statement that Mark made is just false. And I'm sure he's referring to people who claim to be Christian, but aren't acting very Christ-like, which we can all be guilty of. Yeah, I just wanted to interject and point that out.
And I believe that too so much. And I'm just really curious, like, as you went on your journey as being like a historian, studying biblical text, and then being raised, of the church, did you take it? I don't want to put what, because did you take it upon like whatever I continue to discover, I'm going to have to accept, like, say something you did find when you were in Egypt revealed differently than what you were taught? Like, did you kind of tell yourself, I'm going on a quest, like searching for truth without like a set conclusion to prove Christianity, knowing that it could go either way? Am I making sense?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a bit of an unusual household in that my mom grew up in India, and my parents, when I was younger, I was born in Pakistan, and I spent a portion of my childhood in Jordan. I grew up in majority Muslim countries and surrounded by majority Muslim environments. And we had, a copy of the Quran in the room. In fact, we had the Bhagavad Gita and the Book of Mormon, and for a little while, other documents in our house. These were things that my parents, although they never verbally said, these Christianity is true, therefore these are not forbidden. These are not verboten. The truth, capital T truth, of the reality of the world we behold can stand up against scrutiny and investigation. And I did do a great deal of that as a kid. My dad is a historian as well. He has a doctorate, and I grew up on him, reading the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. But at the exact same time, the reason why I actually went to university with full intention of going into the police force,
Oh, wow.
but it was interactions with Muslims and Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and atheists and accusations against the credibility of the Bible, which actually piqued my interest, because they would say things that I thought, if that's true, of course that undermines what I believe. I believe that Jesus is God incarnate. If I can't trust the Gospels as reliable first century eyewitness testimony, then I might as well throw all of this away, because I'm not going to believe a lie, even if it's a convenient lie. And so it was actually the exploration of eventually going into graduate college and then now in working on my PhD, the largest secular university in Canada, that got me thinking, okay, how do we investigate these things? What are the methodologies by which we go about to explore the origins and credibility of something like the Bible? And that investigation, with all due respect to Billy and the content that you put out, has actually confirmed what I believe. I'm dealing with the actual manuscripts.
I love that Wesley says, with all due respect to, uh, your content and what you put out. I don't think it deserves that much respect.
I travel to academic institutions, to other countries, and I look at these things and I read them. And it's a privilege to be able to learn languages like Greek and Coptic and Hebrew and Aramaic and dig into these things. And I think ultimately, I really appreciate what you said there, Mark, with your articulation of your personal relationship. And I think that's so important. But I think it's also important to remember that that relationship is based on something that's real and verifiable. And we can look into the evidence. I have friends who are linguists, philologists, and historians. And when we look into these things and we talk with one another and we're constantly trying to falsify our theories because that's what good history does. We're looking for the falsification.
Mm.
You don't go in, ideally, if you want to be a good historian, with
Right.
trying to prove your original thesis. You go in and say, okay, what are the avenues that actually could disprove this? And then how do we engage with those in an appropriate and articulate manner? So um, uh, what I believe is true, but I believe it based on the evidence of the actual documentation. I've read a lot of the literature that you're talking about, Billy, the Numa Elish, the Atrahasis, the Bhagavad Gita, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I've read some of them in their original languages because I've tried to be a good historian and go back into the primary sources. Or if I can't, engage with people like my friends who are Assyriologists, who are philologists, and try to not just go off of a translation, but the original. And I think I've found largely the opposite of the conclusions that you have made, Billy. And I know that you are very passionate about what you talk about, and I respect that. I just think that the confidence might not actually be backed up by the reality of the evidence. So when we're looking at something like the Sinai Bible, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Barnabas, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Jesus' wife, these are things that actually have provenance that we can verify. And ultimately, I think the answers to the questions of the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of those things point to not just a different conclusion, but actually the opposite conclusion, and that Christianity is true.
Well, now I'm glad you said that. So those three topics are a very small piece of my concept and idea.
I'm sorry. Billy goes, I'm glad you said that. This is so enjoyable.
Of what really happened in the ancient past. So that's a very small fraction. I mean, that's less than 0.1%. You talk about eyewitness accounts to convince you that Christianity is real. There's been eyewitness accounts of every culture that I've visited around this entire planet, and their eyewitness accounts of what they experienced is 100,000% opposite of what's in the Bible. People have,
What do you mean? Can you give me an example?
The Dogon tribe, for example, in Mali, Africa. They experienced a culture that they claim came to this planet from Sirius B. They have the evidence that they knew these beings were from Sirius B because they have the instruments that show the orbit of a trinary star system that we couldn't discover until the 1970s with our modern technology, okay? They understood not only the orbital pattern of Sirius A, B, and C, but even that B was a failed star, which you can't see it from Earth with the naked eye. They knew that it was a white dwarf. They even knew that they said that if you took a tablespoon of it, the entire tribe or 1,000 men couldn't lift the tablespoon. They understood mass and gravity as well. They were told the shape, the sizes, and the colors of all the planets in our solar system, which they recorded. And there's only one wisdom keeper, and that person can never be touched by a person If they get touched by another person, they'd actually be killed. And then they eventually have a mentee that they break down that verbally handed down knowledge to. And that next person then takes over and becomes the wisdom keeper. And they've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. And science, modern science, has found all their information to be 1,000% accurate. Then you have the Hopi tribe of the Americas, indigenous tribes, Hopi tribe, Lakota tribe, also having engagements with these quote unquote star brothers, even having an account of them being taken underground, which you don't see just only in America. I just came back from Turkey. You have the people from Turkey and Mesopotamia also being taken underground into a place called Derinkuyu by these beings, by these people, a structure that's built 12 stories deep underground, that's made out of volcanic tuff, a very soft stone. And if you don't know what you're doing, it'll actually collapse. There's no evidence of any collapse. And it was thousands of years old. It was reused many times. So the mainstream story about what it was used for to hide from Romans is actually false. This place is ancient. And in order to build it, you actually have to have foreknowledge of how to construct this type of an underground civilization that can hold 20 to 30,000 people, places for livestock, places for worship, with no sign of collapse. Then you have to have hundreds of ventilation shafts. And I've been down there. Those ventilation shafts cut through solid rock all the way down to the core. And there's even more. It links to other underground cities that are miles and miles away. As you get to the very base of this area, you can cut through and go to another location. But again, these people were taken under. Also, then you have the ancient Egyptians. Similar story. Major catastrophe comes. These people come and take them underground. Then you have the information in the Egyptian book of Going Forth by Day. More accounts by people, our ancestors, that have accounts that do not match up with the biblical text. And so all of a sudden we're saying that all these cultures, the Aboriginal people, I can go into them as well. I've gone for a walk.
Sure.
What's interesting though is, and I know Wes will probably address this, is that now he's saying that all these accounts from all around the world, they're the opposite of the biblical text. But then earlier he said that the creation story was taken directly from these Sumerian tablets. So, and he believes the stories that are in the Sumerian tablets. So which one is it? Did the Bible copy this, or is it the complete opposite? Which one is it? You have to pick and stay with the narrative.
In the Outback,
Yeah.
and the Aboriginal elders, same thing. They were seated here by Pleiadians. This is their verbal handed down history for thousands of years. And I can go around the world and I can come up with all this information from all these eyewitness accounts from people that should be respected, dignified, and shouldn't be scoffed. And that we're now saying that all this information that they've put forward, all their verbal handed down history, all their written history, that's got to go to the side, because this one text is 1,000% accurate.
Sure, but so my question is, most of that is oral history, correct?
Oh, it's all oral history, even the Bible.
Okay, so when we're engaging with oral history, what methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
Orality. Wesley uses big people words. Big people words that I have never heard before. And I'm sure that Billy is going to take these big people words and add them to his big people word arsenal.
Oh man. Well, first and foremost, some of these texts cultures have written down information in caves. You've got cave paintings. The Dogon tribe actually have not only written down
Sure.
in
No,
caves.
I don't disagree with that. The question is one of historic. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. The question is one of methodological analysis. So you have to have a method by which you can find either that something is falsifiable or that there are avenues by which you can show internal and external accuracy of credibility. So this is what we do with documents. This is what we do with the ancient gospels. This is what I do. I've worked on Xenophon and Plutarch, and we look at the internal evidences and the external multivalent corroboration to try to figure out, okay, yes, we have all these stories. Great. I don't deny that. But as a historian, as someone who's trying to figure out what is accurate, How do you know if I use the term verisimilitude, do you know what that term means?
No, but I can tell you this. Tell me how the Dogon tribe saw Sirius B, knew the orbit of Sirius B, a trinary star system, accurately, and can show you the orbit with a special tool that they made that was given to them by these people. How do they know the shapes, the sizes, the colors, and the orbital pattern of all these planets in our solar system and other star alignments that they would use to have something called the Ziggy and planet and their own harvesting and planting and so forth and so on? That's not enough
So,
evidence that there's something
well,
going on.
I'm not Yeah, I'm not aware of that particular case. And even I mean, I would grant that, the ancient people are far more technological advanced than we give themselves credit for. Just because they're ancient doesn't mean they're stupid. I am well aware, as someone who has done both investigation of the past and done archaeological analysis, that is a reality. My question is simply, okay, you have these stories or you have these accounts, you're referring to them as eyewitness testimony. How are you going about verifying that as that?
Well, if the people had eyewitness testimony about Jesus, they then just wrote down their eyewitness testimony on a piece of paper or parchment paper or papyrus. So these
Right.
people,
So that's where
some of
internal
it's oral, some of
methodological
it's oral, and some
analysis.
of it's actually written down. So I mean, it's the same exact thing. There's really no difference.
Well, no, so you do internal investigations to figure out when something was dated. So something like so when I use that term verisimilitude before, that's something we as historians are looking for. It's a term that simply means the appearance or likelihood of truthfulness. So when you do historical analysis, it's an inference to the best explanation. So you have proof and you have data, and you're extrapolating that data on levels of probability. So some things can be confirmed as high probabilistically true, and other things are lower in their probability that they happened. But there are different methodologies, different ways that you explore historically how that happens.
Well,
So
that
for
was
the
done.
Gospels, you look
That
at
was done with the Dogon tribe. Scientists went there to visit the tribe, and they still have no answers because they used their modern science. They took the best scholars to visit these people, and they're still scratching their heads. Something happened there
sure.
that
And
doesn't.
and I'm not even denying that
No.
necessarily, but the question is, okay, we need different levels of evidence and exploration, not just scientifically, but historically to derive something as eyewitness testimony. Now we have mountains of that, and I'm more than willing to go into some of that with the Gospels as early eyewitness testimony that can be verified externally and internally. But nonetheless, the only reason I ask, Billy, is because I've listened to a fair amount of your content, and I'm unaware of the methods that you use to try to discern between what is an accurate source historiographically and an inaccurate source historiographically.
Right, because as we see with uh, Codex Sinaiticus, he references this, but he didn't even read it, or he says that he misspoke. Then he pivots to the Gospel of Barnabas and the Gospel of Jesus's wife, and these things that are known forgeries. He takes the information that he finds in there and spews it like it's gospel, like it's 100% truth. And so I think what Wes is asking him here is very important, because just based on Billy's use of known forgeries, it shows that he doesn't necessarily know how to look at a document and determine whether or not it is genuinely historically accurate. I'm currently going through this right now in my video for debunking the gospel conspiracy by Aaron Abke. He uses things like the ascent of James and the recognitions of Clement, which are just known forgeries, and uses them as a way to peddle the real secret truth of Christianity. And it just shows that people like Billy Carson, like Aaron, they either willingly ignore the fact that these are known forgeries in order to just continue pushing their narrative, or they don't know how to tell the difference. And I get it. Not everyone is as nerdy as I am. I have not gone to college for this stuff. I'm just really into it, and I wish that I could go to college and just be a super nerd and dive into this stuff for the rest of my life and never leave my desk. I really do. But not a lot of people are well versed in the way that Wesley is and the way that other real historians are. And when it comes to determining what's a forgery, what's not, I think that that's just a clear sign on whether or not we should listen to somebody and whether or not we should take their truth claims as true. And I think Wesley is doing a really good job at exposing Billy's inability to methodically go through that process. So anyway, back to the video. Sorry.
Well, I
Does that make
use
sense?
getting in the airplane and traveling to these places, doing my own research, talking with the indigenous cultures, and researching as much of the text that is available that I can possibly find.
Okay. So I don't dispute that. And I do believe you have done that. But I mean, even from what we've talked about, so you've researched the text, but when we talked about the crucifixion, everything you cited was either, and I mean with all due respect, false in terms of the Sinai Bible, because Codex Sinaiticus is just a 4th century Greek manuscript of the Gospels that we have today, or they were verified forgeries in terms of
Yeah,
the
but
Gospel of Jesus' wife.
you
and
might
the
be
Gospel of
right.
Barnabas.
You may be right on that particular part of the topic, but like I said, that's less than 0.1% of the information that I hold.
Sure, but
Yeah, but that's what you're out talking about all the time. Every time that you're on a podcast, you're out here talking about that 0.1% and just bashing Christianity and people's worldviews, and you're doing this based on forged documents. So if that's just 0.1% of the things that you have in your knowledge, then talk about the other stuff. But even when you do that, if you guys go check out on Inspiring Philosophy's page, me and him, I don't know what the correct grammar is there. We went through his Joe Rogan podcast, and he said things like the Great Pyramid in Giza is the average height of all the great peaks in the world, and there's just no way that you could even come up with that. And I spent a lot of time trying to do it. But anyway, let's continue.
that was the original question. So yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, okay, well, so I'm going off of what we've already talked about. So you've said you explore the text. I don't deny that. But the evidence, by going off of what you have put forward in terms of the actual documentary evidence, is not just less than convincing in my respect. And I mean this with respect, because I think you have done a lot of research. You've traveled to these places. I have too. Like, this is what I do as my career. But I'm not really getting indication, because in history, we go to the primary sources in their primary languages. And when Mark asked, okay, why do you deny the crucifixion? The sources you used were not primary.
Okay, we're still talking about the same thing over and over again. There's so much more we can talk about here. We're wasting a lot of time.
I don't think that they're wasting time at all. He's pinning you down on your nonsense.
There's so much more. That's this amount.
Do you
There's
guys
so much
think
more stuff to talk about?
But if you are wrong about this amount, but this is the amount that you are talking about, you're speaking about Christianity. Wes is a Christian, and not just a Christian, but a very well-educated, in the field that Billy claims to be educated in, Christian, who responds to what you say about Christianity. Wes isn't there to talk to you about the solar system and the Dogon tribe. He's there to talk to you about the claims that you're making about Christianity.
Do you think that all these different cultures and stuff describing these other beings, could those have been, I'm not an expert theologian or whatever, but like where it talks about war, I always want to personally ask you this too, where in the Bible it talks about like wars between the demons and the angels. There's a lot of crazy stuff in the Bible too, that you can prove it's been written, but it also takes some faith because you can't physically see where there was wars between demons and angels and stuff fighting in the heavens. So there's tons going on. Obviously, could any of those have been, like, from what you've discovered or how people have written it? Do you think those could have been demons or angels? Which I don't think
I don't believe in
discredits.
demons or angels at all.
You don't believe in them at all?
Nah, I don't believe in demons and angels. When you read Azazel coming down in the book of Enoch, coming down, and the first thing he does is teach people how to make knives and swords so they can cut a man's head off. You read, you see these quote unquote.
Where's that in the book of
angels.
Enoch?
In the book of Enoch, Azazel. He comes down and he teaches.
Where is that in the book of Enoch? Is it? Are you, so the only reason I ask is because there are two Enochs, first Enoch and second Enoch, and only first Enoch is an actual historical amalgamation.
Not to correct you, Wes, but I think that there's a third Enoch as well. Just if I think I remember reading it, so maybe it's a forgery.
Okay, and then you analyze the fact that these angels are having sex, they're getting drunk. These are just people.
Whoa! Where are angels getting drunk?
Angels party. They go. They hang out with people. They go to war with people. They put on their outfits and go to war with people. This is in the Bible.
Where are they getting drunk though?
They get married. Okay, whatever that means. But they're having a good time.
Married.
Okay, not
in
married.
In fact, Scripture says that angels can't get
like
married.
Merry Christmas.
Not married. Mary, Merry. But the point that I'm making here is when you start to really analyze what these angels are doing, and you start to analyze how.
Yes or no? Did Wes just go off screen to get the book of Enoch? Yes or no? Let me know in the chat right now. Did he just go off screen to go grab the book of Enoch?
Many people are dying in the biblical text. You start to say, well, how many people did Satan actually kill? And when you start doing the tally on the numbers, God's doing most of the killing in the Bible.
I'm gonna give you a hard truth. God does all the killing, all of it. He is in control of who lives and who dies. So everyone who dies, God takes them out. So, and if you do believe in what we believe is you don't just die, cease to exist. You are moving from this location to another. So yes, we die here, but we are alive with Christ.
It's not the devil that's doing all the killing. And God says in Isaiah, I created the good and I created the evil. Do what I say at the Lord. So he's saying that he's doing the good and the evil. That's what he's saying. Yeah. Now, my personal opinion on this whole thing, I just let me get this out because we keep going over the same rhetoric over and over again. My personal opinion is that the biblical text is a good book. There's like I've said, I've got videos. My number one video on Twitter has me saying this. It's good text because if you actually apply some of the information that's in the Bible, you can get a good result, like you have done, Mark.
Right. I struggle with no, I want you to finish your thought. Go ahead.
Yeah. So because you can get a good result, but there's a lot of misinformation in the Bible. There's a lot of false information that's copied from ancient text. And if you go by that text, all of a sudden you end up with 400 years of slavery. You end up with abuse. You end up with divide and conquer tactics that separate people. You end up with people thinking that they're the chosen ones and they're the chosen people. And we've been promised this promised land so we can eradicate another race of people because this is our land, because God promised it to us. You have people that want to go on the papal inquisitions and torture and kill and murder over 80 million people. You have the American Holocaust, 111 million indigenous natives slayed. You have all this going on because of this text, which is set up so contradictory.
Well, never mind. I'm not going to comment.
Throughout its path across time. You get into the New Testament, slavery is still being condoned in the New Testament.
Was it?
Honor thy slave master as you would honor God or Jesus, it says.
Was it? I really love Mark.
I believe. So in Ephesians. So
I always thought that, but the God of the Old Testament too, like I'll let you go real quick, but I'm just, and I know you have to go soon too, but I'm speaking as I challenge my own subject. It was always I'm telling you, God, this is where Jesus came in and changed everything for me. But like the Old Testament too, it is hard for me to read even Noah thinking God's like mad at everyone. Let's flood the whole world and murder all these people that I created.
That's pretty.
So he wasn't mad at everyone. So just if God is who he is, which he is, he knows our innermost thoughts. And he flooded the world because there was not one good thought found in humans. Every thought that they had was evil. Their hearts were bent on it. These were just purely evil people. Not a single speck of good in them. And it's interesting how you'll have people say, well, all these bad things are happening in the world. Why doesn't God ever stop them? And then when God actually stops the evil, now you complain that God wiped out all the evil people. It's bananas to me, this type of reasoning.
Bad stuff.
But it seems so contradictory to, and I'm speaking, Wes, as a Christian, and I don't have the, whatever they're called, papyrus. There isn't. This is where people, but I continue to follow in my heart, but it's so, Jesus did not seem like that at all. But they say God's the same as then as he was now, like time, he created time. So he didn't come down, as Jesus and change and evolve and then come back with new information and be like, you know what, I don't think I'm going to flood and do. So these are more, I guess, like bigger moral questions that there's not necessarily, but that's where things like the Old Testament challenge me at times. And I know there's a lot of things where they correlate, and I've seen some cool things that come together too, but it's just like, man, to think like I'm going to flood and murder all these people that I created and then leave a few alive doesn't seem like what Jesus did at all.
Sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but
it's
there's
all
a couple
right.
more points I want to make because he got a lot of talking in. It did say, slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear as sincerity of heart as you would obey Christ. That's slaves. Obey your earthly masters with respect and fear with sincerity in your heart, just as you would obey Christ.
Keep reading. Keep reading. What else does it say about how the masters are supposed to treat their slaves? Keep reading.
So it does say that Ephesians 6:5, but there's so many aspects.
That stuff is what.
And what is the context of what Ephesians is saying? So I think this is very important because we don't take text in isolation. So within Scripture, and this is why all the abolition movements throughout history have only been Judeo-Christian movements. There's never been an abolition movement that wasn't Christian. And actually, there's the recent work by historian Tom Holland, not the Spider-Man actor, different Tom Holland, but his recent Dominion highlights this fact very well. This is not a Christian, but in it, he shows that going right back into the antiquity with the Cappadocian Fathers was the first abolition movement, and then into the British and the American abolition movements. These were fundamentally Christian movements ran by Christians because of the idea that when Paul, who wrote that letter to Ephesians, says, in Christ there is no slave nor free, he's breaking down those barriers. So in Ephesians, when he says, slaves obey your masters, he's operating on the socioeconomic context of what he's going on. And he's saying, hey, we have slaves and we have free people, okay? If you're a believing slave, if you're a slave who believes in Jesus as the Messiah, don't be equitable in how you are living your life. Reflect Christ accurately. And that's a movement that he is fundamentally working towards that eventually starts to completely take out the legs.
This is where we would argue, Wes. I would be. I love. By the way, I love that we're all. This is respectful. I don't feel this is all just three grown-ups talking in a healthy way.
I appreciate Wes.
And I think this is going to give us. But this is where you and I sitting down in the room. I would be like, great that you came to that, but like, what were the methodologies did you use to conclude that him saying the slave be the master to the slave, you're able to interpret it meaning that he's meaning that? Because I was also raised in the church, and I would question when they're like, oh, in the old days when they said women don't wear jewelry, that's a sin. You would know the exact verse.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, but that was just written because at that time, that was what they did. But then the next week they're telling me, but if you believe in the Bible, you either believe in all of it or none of it. I'm like, well, how come you're just, and they're like, but it's okay for women to do that. Now, those are the things where it's like, we've got to be honest here. Like if you're respectfully challenging Billy, Billy's going to go and do research and be like, okay, now I want to see how to have, because we're all critical thinkers. Those things seem to just get so blindly pushed over when they're like, but that doesn't apply now. And it's like, I think there's more common ground than people think, and so many words to recall, but also like, it's weird to me to think that he would be like, women aren't allowed to wear jewelry and this crap. And then Jesus came and he's like, none of that matters. And then for them to be like, oh, that only made sense then, but now it doesn't apply. But believe everything in the Bible all applies. You know what? Like as a Christian myself, this is why like I'm always like,
So there's a discipline called hermeneutics, and that's the methodology of interpretation. So there are multiple levels that you interpret something. So whether we're dealing with, say, the book of Ephesians, or we're dealing with Tacitus's Annals, we look at something and we contextually read it within the framework of how it's being written. So there's a historical approach where we look at the context. Okay, Paul is writing to a church in Ephesus. What's going on in Ephesus, and how is what he's saying in that city in what is modern day Turkey? How does that pertain to that particular time and framework? Where is Paul coming from?
How does it pertain to now, though, is my question. Because
so
you're giving me,
here's how I answer that question.
And I love you to death, Wes, but you're starting to give me, sorry to interrupt you. I believe in God.
So just real quick, if you guys could go hit the like button, there's 51 people in here, only 25 likes. It really helps the algorithm, So please go do that for me right now, ahora mismo.
Believe in, and Billy believes in God too. I get why things are challenged and things need to be challenged, but it's saying that was to women then, but being raised in the church and stuff, they say, but then they'll pick something and they're like, but that doesn't apply to them now, because in that context, he was talking to this certain town.
Man, Mark, I really do love you, brother. But like next time, just let them fight. Just let them fight.
Where they were having problems with I'm like, well, that's not written anywhere. And they're like, well, if you go to blah, blah, blah. And then they say, well, God is all knowing. So he perfectly chose what was in and out of the Bible. I believe whoever created the universe, which is God, in my own opinion, is way smarter than any of us. Why would he leave something like that crap in there, that women shouldn't wear jewelry and all that, and then have in the New Testament, that crap doesn't really matter?
This is why it's so important to study your Bible. I do a Bible study, shameless plug, I do a Bible study every Monday at 8 p.m. This Monday I won't be doing it, but usually every Monday at 8 p.m. And we go like verse by verse through the Bible. But you don't have to plug into mine. Just study how to read the Bible. That is something that is so important. Study the context of different literature, the different types of literature, who is being written to, when is it being written, who is the author. All of these things will better help you understand, because the Bible is not just one big book. It's 66 different books written by about 40 authors over almost 2,000 years, and each one is for a specific reason. So just wanted to plug that in there.
Like that's where it's like, I have to believe that it's not I do think there is parts where things got written in, and I don't think they're the major things personally, like whether or not Jesus was crucified, which I think is a major thing, because if he wasn't, that I've studied that a lot, that would challenge that would challenge the core of my whole belief system over whether or not it said if women can wear jewelry or something. But I do think that, and I don't know if there's an exact answer to this, but I do think, that's perplexing to me.
No,
The God of all wisdom would choose to leave some of that in there. It's like, why?
Yeah. So here's the thing. So the Bible was written for us, but it wasn't written to us. There is an original audience, whether that's the ancient Israelite in the ancient Near Eastern culture, or whether it's the Greco-Roman believer in Jesus within the city of Ephesus. So as historians, and I mean, most of the books on this end of my shelf are what are referred to as commentaries.
Sorry, I got to cut you off again. Wouldn't God be smart enough to know, I'm not just going to write to this demographic of this civilization now, knowing I'm a God who created the whole world, and people are still going to be studying this thousands of years later?
That's what I was going to say, but I didn't want to cut it off.
Yes.
So I'm sorry. By the way, I'm the worst interrupter ever, and it's more of my ADD type thing of like, I get a thought and I got to get it out, or else I freaking forget it. So I'm sorry about interrupting. Thanks for throwing me under the bus for that.
Yeah. So, how I would answer that is I would say this. So you do have examples of where Paul is writing, and he's writing to a particular group. And so we look at, okay, what does it mean for a woman to wear and adorn themselves with gold in a first century Greco-Roman context, right? It has to do with the fact that prostitutes would wear those things. So we need to ask the question, what is the intention of the text?
But, sorry, yes, I got to ask you again, though.
Meaning.
But how do you interpret that? That's what I've been. The reason I'm interrupting you is I've heard this.
So what? And I don't know if Wes answers this, but what Mark is asking right now is, why didn't God, if God is all knowing, he would know that if we leave this in the Bible, it would confuse people. Therefore, maybe this shouldn't be in the Bible because it wasn't, quote unquote, written by God or inspired by God. So why would that be in there if he knew that it would be irrelevant in the future and it would confuse people and cause X, Y, Z? And what this is we have to understand that God does not have to do anything for us at all. He could have left us with no Bible. He could have left us with no way for salvation. He doesn't have to do any of that. So this is us trying to bring God down to our level and say, God, why haven't you done things in the way that I believe you should have done them? If you are so smart, then why does this seem so stupid? And that is, I think, human arrogance. And I'm not saying that that's what Mark is intentionally doing. He's not intentionally being arrogant towards God in asking these questions. These are good questions to ask, but it's bringing God down. This is essentially what it does. It brings God down, and we're forcing God to do things in the way that we think would be best, when we couldn't even have the slimmest bit of capacity to understand why God did things the way that he did them. And we want to think that we could somehow have done it a little bit better, right? And that's what this type of questioning is.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
I respect the crap out of you for how deep you go into studying the ancient texts and stuff, which is so important for the real root of it all. But
just wanted to say, Lisa, I definitely think you should spend some time on my channel, going down some of my Gurus Debunked playlist. I'm so glad that you're here.
They've told me that same thing, and I'm like, but why doesn't it just say that he was speaking to the women and stuff that were prostitutes of that time? Like where does
No,
that
he's not
correlate?
speaking to prostitutes. He's talking about purity, and he's talking in the context of when he says, don't adorn yourself with jewelry. The original audience, and we can explore this
But
by
do you
the
just
historical
realize how dumb
analysis.
that sounds? What, saying the original audience, then later on saying, but now it's okay for this audience because these women and stuff
No,
don't.
because the
I'm just
point that
saying,
he's
like, I
making,
get why people like if we're gonna we got to be open minded.
Dropping the ball here, Mark. I'm sorry, but we are dropping the ball here. The goal is to get Wes and Billy to have this discussion, and I know that you want these questions answered, and you could definitely ask me these questions. I know that you're connected with Wes now. You could definitely ask him these questions, but man, I'm like itching to have them go back and forth again.
We're punching holes in other stuff to punch holes in our own, and even
That is true, Bencita. I am being Mark. My apologies.
if it's agreeing, like don't you think that's a little? I get what you're saying. Like if prostitutes at that right now, if prostitutes all wear a red band around their neck and that signals what all prostitutes are, and it's like don't wear that.
Prostitutes have tattoos, and a lot of women who aren't prostitutes have tattoos.
Right. I don't think it's this black and white that only the prostitute and also you're only talking about in one little town. So my bigger question would be to God.
Well, in Greco-Roman antiquity,
Like, why did you put that in the Bible?
So
that just
take-
confuses everyone, though, because
God didn't
all
put that-
these
God
other
didn't-
civilizations are going to be reading that.
We have something we keep saying here. God didn't put that in the Bible. Men put this stuff in the Bible.
And I think that was some of the old. I'm telling you, Billy. It's for me. I think he'll get back. If it wasn't for Jesus. Sorry, we got you back on, Wes.
Yeah.
I
I understand what you're saying, Mark, but what I'm saying is I think we're missing a big point here. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the Bible is written by people, men who are extremely flawed. And the evidence of that is what they took the information that's in that biblical text and what they did with it globally to other human beings, and how they even wrote about it in the Bible, how they enslaved and tortured people in the biblical text. So in that case, even in the book of Deuteronomy, which is one of the most brutal books out there, where everything is given okay to rape women, kill children. If one person talks against your Lord, go to that town and kill the whole town, burn the town down.
So brutal.
It's just
in
too
the Old
much. Like I
Testament.
said,
Or turns people into salt.
The killing in the Bible is not being done.
Oh man, God is so mean. He's so mean. And by the way, I am gonna pause and react because this is a reaction video. So sorry, Bencita.
By Satan. That's why I don't care about. I don't believe in demons and all this other kind of stuff. Moses goes to the top. He talks to God. He gets his tablet. The first commandments are, "Thou shalt not kill." He comes down. As soon as he sees the people making a golden calf, he kills most of them. It's just like, come on. It's just ridiculous.
And I've learned with some of these stories how it correlated with kill your first son, related to then what happened with Jesus. But I'm still like, in my head, they're like, that's so beautiful. He was willing to sacrifice his son as God would. And I'm like,
I don't believe
that's so mean that God,
I don't believe it's beautiful.
like, Jesus changed my whole story. No, when I'm in heaven, and I don't believe God is irrational, because would be smarter than every one of us to be able to literally create everything. I would be like, God, I don't like what.
Yo, praise God for Wes's patience.
Why would you tell that dude to kill his son?
I don't see any benefit in killing your own kid.
And then right at the last second, he's like, no, it's cool. I was just testing your faith in me. It's like, that seems psychologically, to me, when God's like, kill your own son, but then at the last minute,
it's sadistic.
Don't do it. Oh man,
Abraham.
You proved your faith to me. I would be like, God, isn't there like I don't feel like you need to do that to a person. I don't think that's such a beautiful story. And I'm talking as a Christian. There's a lot of things with the Old Testament I struggle with, but it doesn't change my overarching beliefs. And I think there is things that are written in, maybe misinterpreted, that aren't as important as the bigger things. Like, the crucifixion and stuff of Jesus. Like, I'm hoping to God that your methodology of proving that is right compared to Billy's in that specific scenario. But in some of these other things, like, I almost rather them be disproved that God killed his that God and I've heard a lot of these different answers and stuff, and I know God gave us free will, and I understand all that too, but it's just like the God of the Old Testament and Jesus, it's hard to believe that they're the same person.
Yeah, I cut out quite a bit
Yeah.
there, and so I think I missed
And
a
then
large
I'm
portion.
not,
so
yeah,
I
you keep
apologize
popping
for
off,
that.
Wes, and I'm just,
I might get to say a lot of stuff that I want to say. Go ahead.
I'll shut
Yeah,
up.
so
Actually,
let me just say this. So the most quoted verse of the Bible in the Bible is a version of Exodus 34:6, which fundamentally describes who God is, that he's compassionate and loving, full of grace and mercy, and abounding in steadfast love. And so, in fact, if you read the book of Jonah, the beef that Jonah has with God, the reason why he doesn't want to go to Nineveh is because he believes that God is so loving that if he tells the Ninevites to repent and they repent, God is going to forgive them. So fundamentally, we have the picture of God consistently throughout the Bible, both in the Old and New Testaments, as being a God who is rich in love and mercy and abounding in steadfast kindness. And so we want a God who is just. And just to speak very briefly to the slavery issue, I mean, Leviticus 25 condemns by death the man stealing. So stealing someone and selling them into slavery. And the fact that the 10 Commandments are prefaced with, you are a nation who was slaves. You know, I'm the God of Israel who brought you out of Egypt. So there's a fundamental difference, and there's lots of literature on this. I would encourage people to read my friend Paul Copan's book, Is God a Moral Monster? He's written some excellent stuff. He's also written on Did God Command Genocide in the Old Testament? He's a leading expert in the field of a comparative analysis of ancient Near Eastern war literature. And so there are very coherent explanations for these things, and that slavery within ancient Israel was very, very different from what slavery around the ancient Near East was like. And on top of that, once again,
Slavery continued on.
when abolition movements happen, what's that? Sorry, Billy?
I said slavery continued on throughout the Bible with no problems.
But it was always undergirded by the fact that this was not the ideal, that this was something that should not be done. And even slavery within ancient Israel was fundamentally different than slavery around the ancient Near East. This is not a contested fact. You can look at the scholarship of individuals like Wright, who's written extensively on this. He's an ancient Near Eastern ethicist, and there's vast difference between the law codes in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers, and something like the Code of Hammurabi, which puts people on a tier system and gives different punishments depending on where they are within society. That's not true in ancient Israel. If you were a king and you stole somebody and you sold them into slavery, they would punish you by death.
But if you steal somebody else's slave, you can't steal somebody else's slave. That's not a good thing to do, right? The point that I'm making here, I got to say something before I get out of here, is the Bible is full of contradictions. The biggest problem that we have is we're dealing with a civilization on this planet that is psychologically impaired. Human beings are psychologically impaired. This entire planet, we're living on an insane asylum. Earth is an absolute insane asylum. Mental illness has spread throughout the planet Earth like a complete virus. And when you take a text like the biblical text, knowing that human beings globally are mentally ill, this entire planet is a mental insane asylum. And I'm talking everyone. All 8 billion, whatever number of people we have now, are all mentally ill. And what I mean is there's different levels of mentally ill. We all have trauma that we're not dealing with. We all have internal issues. We all have situations that shadow work that needs to be done. And some people are at higher levels of mental illness than others. Most of us are functional mental illness people. But when you take a look at the biblical text and you start going through this information, and it's the way that it's laid out, it becomes a proponent of more divide and conquer tactics. It becomes a proponent of racism. It becomes a proponent of slavery. It becomes a proponent of all these things that are dark and ill, including murder and killing in the name of God, which has been done how many millions of times?
But I just got to stop. But if you look at the data, the data says the opposite. The data say the opposite. I'm telling you, go to Inspiring Philosophies, How Christianity Changed the World, and just look at the data. He just did another debate as well. Just go look at it. This is not what the data says.
So my thing about the biblical text is it actually authored by the creator of the universe, or is it authored by the dark forces of, maybe, if this Satan is real, Satan himself? And the reason why I say that is because all-knowing, all-loving God, omnipotent and omniscient, that is creating not only this universe, probably most likely multiple universes, because a creator never stops creating, especially with infinite power, is now at some point going to author a text that is going to allow human beings to misinterpret it and take it in his name and begin to slay people, torture people, and enslave people worldwide, to claim that you're chosen ones, to set up a state of chosen people, and then to even claim that you have chosen land, and to torture and kill even more people, women and children, in modern times, still going on to this very day. To me, that doesn't seem like a very intelligent being, especially a being that knows the beginning and the end. So if you know the beginning and the end, you have a certain level of foreknowledge. You have advanced knowledge that goes beyond. You know what's the ending before the end even occurs, so you set up everything for success.
Yes, you are correct, Billy. And what you're doing right now is you're arguing from a position of not even being able, as us finite beings that are on this little tiny planet within this universe, that we could not even begin to fathom how God would lay out the beginning to the end. Yet we're gonna take his word and say, because people have done bad things with this, therefore God couldn't have authored this or inspired people to author this, because if I was God, I would have made it perfect, so that way there could be no questions about it. This is what Billy's doing. We saw this earlier, right? So, sorry, I'll let them continue.
Why? Because a genius solves problems before they happen. And I'm going to drop the mic on that.
Yeah, so have you solved the problem of your space agency yet?
With some of that too, I think came back on.
Yeah. I gotta get to this meeting.
Yeah, there's old stuff that it's hard to comprehend, but the thing that continued to change my life was Jesus, and the core of it was love conquers all things.
I can't miss this.
So
This big
yeah, keep going.
All right, brother.
We can do a follow
I
up.
really appreciate it, Billy. Thanks so much for interacting.
So yeah, I would
Yeah,
personally
and
love to know if it doesn't cut out a follow up on just out of my own curiosity, Wes, of these are things, again, like Jesus has changed everything in my studies. I mean, I was young, I was in trouble, I was in jail at age 17. It changed my whole life, and everything Billy was just talking about. Yes, of course, we all know people are broken. It's Jesus.
So I'm just going to see if Wes responds to what Billy said. But if he doesn't, I'm just going to stop this right here.
Jesus that has helped me through, all of us were never perfect, through my brokenness.
JP, were we watching the same video?
And there's so much more love than so many people know. And it's unfortunate that some of this stuff has caused, people can pull something and there is anger, and there's truths to what he was just at least talking about there when you were cutting off about the wars and everything too. And it's sad because like that's not what Jesus is doing there for us. And for people that truly don't have, the Jesus I know in their life, I don't preach down on them like I'm better than you or
All right, guys. What we can do here, I'm gonna just cut this off. If you want to see, because they go on for about another half hour. That's what Mark said, is that after Billy left, Wes answered a bunch of questions for him. So I don't want to, steal that thunder. So definitely go over to Mark's channel and watch the rest of it. But what are you guys' thoughts on this? Let me know in the chat. I'll stay on for a couple of minutes to get your guys' opinions on this while I'm waiting for some stuff to come in. Like, share, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. I'm going to shamelessly plug my book right here. It's Law of Attraction, a gateway drug to spiritual heroin. I spent years and years and years being fooled by the law of attraction and all of the spirituality that comes hidden within it. And I spent a lot of time researching and debunking it and put it all into that book right there. So go get that on Amazon for a stocking stuffer for somebody. So, all right, I'm just gonna check the chats. I don't know how to move the chats and bring them on screen, so my apologies, guys. JP says, Billy just freed us, but y'all too blind to see. Maybe, I mean, I'm wearing glasses, so maybe I am too blind to see. Billy got spanked. Billy got destroyed. Billy was like, okay, I'm done being embarrassed. No, he did have to go to a meeting. Wes said that he caveated their conversation with that. Billy's points went over y'all heads. That's great. Awesome. All right, cool. So thank you guys so much for being here. I did a deep dive into Billy Carson's space agency. Now, I'll leave the link for that in the description, but if you're watching the replay of this, I'll put it right here. And I want you guys to check that out because it's some pretty interesting stuff. He claims that he is the CEO of this space agency that is working on breakthroughs in, I believe it's zero gravity propulsion or something like that. And it's really interesting what I found out when I was digging into it. So definitely head over there. But all right. Nothing but man in here still messing up today like they did back in the day. Word. All right, guys. Thank you again so much. Mark, thank you so much for getting those two together. Let's pray that they get back together in an actual debate format with an actual debate topic. That would be so incredible. But God bless. I will see you guys on the